From 1965 to 1977, Srila Prabhupada traveled the world preaching, working tirelessly translating his books, while at the same time keeping in constant communication with his disciples through personal letters. It is through these letters that we are able to derive life lessons, material and spiritual, as well as appreciate Srila Prabhupada's loving care for his disciples. Let us now hear from one of those fortunate devotees who personally received correspondence from His Divine Grace.
We're honored today to have with us Satsvarup Goswami, who is one of the earliest disciples of Srila Prabhupada, having joined at 26 Second Avenue in New York in 1966. He is a prolific author, with one of his main contributions to ISKCON is his publication of Srila Prabhupada's Leelamrita. In addition to that service, in the early days, he was fortunate to transcribe the audio tapes that Srila Prabhupada dictated for his translation work. Being one of the earliest disciples, Satsvarup was second to only Brahmananda Prabhu in the amount of letters exchanged with Srila Prabhupada. And from that body of letters, Satsvarup has published 3 hardback volumes containing those letters and the lessons he learned from that correspondence. So Maharaj, please share with us a couple of those letters.
Yes, gladly. Thank you, Siddhanta, for putting out all this sharing of Srila Prabhupada through various media, and letters is a good one. Here's a letter by Prabhupada, June 13th, 1968. My dear Satsvarupa, please accept my blessings. I thank you for your letter dated June 8th, 1968, as well as for the booklet you have sent describing your activities in Boston. Your endeavor to utilize energy 24 hours for Krishna consciousness is a great qualification. I am very glad to know that you are risking $350 a month for taking a nicer accommodation for our temple. I quite appreciate this attempt, and Krishna will surely help you. I have sent one letter to Miss Rose and tried to keep friendship with her. She will gradually become more and more interested in our temple affairs. Everyone has dormant love for Krishna, and we have to give one a possible chance to awaken it. Miss Rose was taking gradual interest in our temple, and I think if you flatter her a little bit more, she will come to the Krishna consciousness platform and be a great help to the center. I am so pleased to learn that the new temple location will be near the business district. In business circles, there is a popular English saying that you can earn more by sitting in one place than by traveling to many places, provided you can sit down in a place with due consideration. Similarly, if you actually have selected a nice place, that place itself will act as advertisement for popularizing our Krishna consciousness. For the time being, Devananda must stay with you. He should not come here for the present. When we shall form a Sankirtan party for the European tour, I shall call him. Please show him this part of my letter, and I hope he will understand. He is a very good, nice, sober boy, and he will be a good help to your activities. In the meantime, I have received one letter from James. I am enclosing his letter. I do not know what he wants to know from me. This boy is a new boy, and he might have so many ideas within his brain. If you can train him for your purposes, he will be a great service. We may always expect that we get always untamed boys and girls, and so we have to train them up. That depends on our capacity. So if you can tackle this boy, he may be also a good assistant. Our whole program is to train the untrained. Nobody is in Krishna consciousness, and we are trying our best to bring them to that platform. Hoping you are well, your ever well wisher, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. He ends the letter there. Then my comment. This was the first letter Prabhupada wrote me from Montreal after visiting us in Boston for the month of May. Prabhupada refers to the booklet I sent him. During his stay, I kept a journal of his speeches and activities, which ran to nearly 50 single-spaced typewritten pages. I had entitled it Swami in Boston and sent it to him. I have since drawn from that booklet to write Prabhupada Leela. Prabhupada's thanking me for this booklet was an indirect approval of what I later expanded into my main service, writing about Prabhupada. I always had the urge to observe Prabhupada's activities and share them in writing with devotees. I also used to photocopy his letters and send them to other centers. This was curtailed, however, when Prabhupada indicated that some of his letters were confidential. Their instructions were not always meant to be applied generally. In philosophic discussions about the emphasis of different services and the policies of ISKCON, we should be careful of proving our case by quoting Prabhupada's letters. I do not think they have the same weight in philosophical matters as Prabhupada's purports, although they are absolute. They were addressed to certain persons and were written at certain times. Prabhupada's purports, however, are addressed to all humanity and are applicable for at least the next 10,000 years. With this letter, Prabhupada recalls some of the events he took part in while in Boston. Miss Rose, an elderly lady who for a while showed some patronage to the devotees, although thought she herself should take up Krishna consciousness. She was a neurotic, frivolous person, but had somehow developed an affection for the devotees in the storefront temple. When Srila Prabhupada came to Boston, she increased her devotional activities. She sometimes drove Prabhupada in her car, and she attended his lectures and darshans. Because she was sentimental and not really deep thinking or inclined much to inquire into the absolute, and because she was also attached to her own conditioning, Prabhupada had to encourage her gradually. She was the kind of aging, middle-aged woman who was still concerned about appearing youthful. Prabhupada often referred to her as young. Once Prabhupada discussed old age and said that if a person is young, quote, like Miss Rose, unquote, then he can digest anything, even stones, whereas, quote, an old man like me, unquote, finds difficulty. One time, Miss Rose told Prabhupada she thought he was beautiful. He replied that she made such a statement only because she herself was in a beautiful state of consciousness and saw everything in beautiful Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada also asked her to donate her car and take a more active part in the temple, but she laughed in a flustered and nervous way and said, "I wish I could." Before Prabhupada left, however, there was a rather traumatic scene involving Miss Rose. She came to Prabhupada on one of his last days there, but Prabhupada's secretary, Govindadasi, did not allow her entry. Miss Rose became almost hysterical and barged into Prabhupada's room, crying and screaming about her mistreatment. Then she invented examples of different abuses she had suffered at the hands of the devotees. I suppose behind her misbehavior was a kind of attachment to his divine grace, and therefore she had become panic-stricken when Govinda Dasi had denied her permission to see him. Srila Prabhupada did not appreciate her wild behavior and uncontrolled crying. I was present and tried to speak patiently to her, asking her to behave properly and leave the room. She calmed down eventually, but after the incident, her relationship with us waned. In his letter, Prabhupada remembers her with kind words. He is also seeing things from the viewpoint of the Acharya of our Boston temple. Prabhupada advises me it would be to our advantage to remain friends with her. He himself had sent her a letter. Like everyone else, Miss Rose had dormant love for Krishna, and we had to give her the opportunity to awaken it. Prabhupada also gives tactical advice in dealing with her. Quote, if you flatter her a little more, she will come to the Krishna conscious platform and may be a great help to the center. Rupa Goswami says, Yena tena prakarena mana Krishna niveshayat, sarve vidi nisheda syor etayor eva kinkara. Somehow or other become Krishna conscious. The rules and regulations can later follow. We can induce someone to take to Krishna consciousness, and that may sometimes include flattering that person's false ego. In this letter, we can also see Srila Prabhupada acting as the governing body commissioner. Prabhupada was concerned from a business point of view with the location of our temple. He was always an expert manager. Therefore, he quotes a maxim about a salesman who can do better by staying in a good location than by traveling to different places. Prabhupada also approved of our taking the risk of paying rent for a good place. Regarding this statement about Devananda staying with us, Devananda wanted to leave our temple, and I asked Prabhupada whether he could stay, since I needed him. In his GBC function, Prabhupada directed Devananda to stay. As for James, he was a crazy boy who stayed briefly in our temple and later wrote a letter to Prabhupada complaining about us. Prabhupada could see that he was crazy, and therefore he did not answer his incoherent letter, but forwarded it to me. In this way, Prabhupada supported his faithful leaders and did not accept unfounded criticisms. During the same period, it struck me how we have to, quote, tackle, unquote, untrained crazy boys. Not long after, some of the temple presidents met on the East Coast, and we resolved that crazy persons should not be allowed to live in our temples. When we sent this resolution to Prabhupada, he replied by criticizing our policy of rejecting unfit persons as too stiff. He wrote that it is easy to turn someone away from the temple and back into the arms of Maya, but the difficult thing was to train that person. Our whole program is to train the untrained. Nobody is in Krishna consciousness, and we are trying our best to bring people to that platform. Prabhupada also gave us similar advice when we opened the Gurukula. One of the teachers wrote Prabhupada how we were carefully screening the students before enrolling them. Prabhupada replied, we should not be interested in screening students, but in understanding that they are all untrained. Thus, we will make them fit. This was Prabhupada's own attitude toward preaching in the beginning of his missionary work at 26 Second Avenue. Of course, a new person cannot be strange or disconcerting to others in the ashram. Prabhupada used to allow the Bowery derelicts to sit in the temple, even though they stank. But if they made a ruckus, then they were not allowed to stay. We should all be tolerant. That's the end of that letter.
Good. Let's go now to page 180 and discuss that letter.
Okay. This letter, for some reason, is undated. My dear Satsvarupa, please accept my blessings. I am in receipt of your letter dated February 7, 1968, along with Srimad Bhagavatam copies. Thank you very much for your unalloyed service. I am very much encouraged when I hear from New York and Boston that things are going nicely. Do not be worried about my material body. We are to serve through our spiritual body. The spiritual body has no connection with material bodily afflictions. One who is not afflicted by the material body or mental diseases is ready to enter into the spiritual kingdom of God. You can arrange all my needs in Boston in May, as my program is to go to New York in April and to go to Boston in May, and then in June to go to Montreal. Herewith find one tape of 2:21:68. Offer my blessings to Pradyumna, to Jodharani, and to the other boy who has joined you. Be always absorbed in Krishna consciousness, and he will give you all intelligence. Your ever well-wisher, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. Then my comment. Prabhupada begins this letter by thanking me for my, quote, unalloyed service, unquote. I would like to further explain how important this statement was to me. If I am to comment honestly on my letters from Srila Prabhupada, I must not merely echo the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, but recall the emotional and spiritual reciprocation when I received his letters. A letter by the spiritual master is in one sense above the scriptures. In no scripture does the Supreme Lord personally say, thank you for your unalloyed service. The Shastras state that devotees who chant Krishna's names are dear to him, but an individual reader of the Shastras may not know positively if this statement applies to him. And even if he does know, the injunction applies generally to all devotees. But in this letter, I am addressed. That very address, my dear Satsvarupa, is the name Prabhupada gave me, the name by which I am known, to Krishna. This unique gift from the spiritual master is even more valuable than the gift of the Shastras. The Mahabharata explains, Tarako Pratishta Shrutayo Vibhina Nasa Rishir Yasya Matam Nabdinam Dharmasya Tattvam Nihitam Guhayam Mahajana Yenagata Sapanta. Translation. Realization of the absolute truth cannot be attained by pursuing logic, since one's logic may be defeated by a better logician. A philosopher does not become distinguished unless he defeats all the previous philosophers. Learning about the Absolute from the Shastras is very difficult because of their variety and grave meaning. But the Absolute Truth is hidden in the hearts of the unalloyed pure devotees. Therefore, one should follow the path of the Mahajans. From this verse, we can understand that receiving personal instruction from a Mahajana, such as Srila Prabhupada, is more valuable than simply studying many Shastras. But since I did not think my service was, quote, unalloyed, how was I to understand the statement in this letter? I understood that Prabhupada was being kind, but he was not cheaply flattering me. Out of his liberal kindness, he thought my working full time for him was unalloyed. I wanted to be an unalloyed servant, and Srila Prabhupada's blessings in this letter pulled me strongly in that direction. On a certain level, my service and that of my godbrothers was unalloyed and pure, and Srila Prabhupada, in recognition of a certain purity in us, even though we were neophytes, was raising us upwards. Ultimately, he had inconceivably made us unalloyed servants. Our connection with Prabhupada is inconceivable. Therefore, it is also possible that one who works for him can, by his grace, become an unalloyed devotee. Prabhupada says so, and this is confirmed by Sanatana Goswami. Yata kaschana tam yati kamsham rasa vidhanata tata diksha vidhanena dvijatvam jayate nirnam. As bell metal is turned to gold when mixed with mercury in an alchemical process, so one who is properly trained and initiated by a bona fide spiritual master immediately becomes a Brahmana. That's from CC Adi 7.47. In this letter, Prabhupada also shows his concern for his fledgling centers in Boston and New York. He warns me, however, not to misplace my concern for his health. Don't be worried about my material body, he says. There are several points to consider here. Prabhupada is referring to a letter I sent him in which I expressed concern for his health and hoped he had been freed of his disease. He sees a defect in the way I stated my concern. There are a number of ways to understand this statement. 1. Prabhupada's illness was not material because of infection of karma. His body was spiritual, and his illness was not ordinary. 2. Even if he appeared afflicted, that did not stop his Krishna consciousness. Devotional service is uninterrupted and can be done even in one's mind. Prabhupada's Krishna consciousness was therefore unaffected, even in reverses such as illness. 3. Therefore, even if a pure devotee is disturbed by apparent bodily distress, his mind remains pure in Krishna consciousness, and he is eligible to go back to Godhead. Shastra states, Tate nukampam susamikshamano uschana evatmam kritam vipakam red vagvapur bir vididham namaste jiveteyo multipade sadaya bhak. Translation. My dear Lord, one who constantly waits for your causeless mercy to be bestowed upon him, and who goes on suffering the resultant actions of his past deeds, offering you respectful obeisances from the core of his heart, is surely eligible to become liberated, for it has become his rightful claim. Bhagavatam 10:14-8. Point number 4. When Prabhupada referred here to, quote, mental disease, unquote, he meant material desires. Prabhupada impressed on me that if one is in pure Krishna consciousness, he should never be called diseased or sick. Apparently, I addressed Prabhupada in that way. Quote, disease, unquote, is always material. Prabhupada therefore noticed some defect in my concern. Similarly, my godbrother, Madhusudana, once wrote Prabhupada about Prabhupada's ill health. Madhusudana also got a letter which began, "My dear boy," and informed him that his thinking about Prabhupada's illness was like an ordinary victim was a misjudgment. 5. Even though one is in good physical health, if he is afflicted by bodily attachment and a separate attitude from devotion to Krishna, he is diseased. 6. Thus we have to always see the spiritual master in terms of his spiritual position. By saying, don't be worried about my material body, Prabhupada also distinguishes between a material and a spiritual body. Actually, he had no material body, and his, quote, affliction, unquote, was either a transcendental symptom of ecstasy or a result of the sinful activities of his disciples, or it may have been a chance for his disciples to serve him. However, the disciples should not think that the spiritual master's illness is his contamination. This letter also contains items of ongoing reciprocation. Prabhupada announces he is going to come to Boston in May. Also, Prabhupada closes another tape. As I read this letter in preparation to write this commentary, I again feel the joy of receiving one of Prabhupada's tapes in the mail. Think of the spontaneous joy of a child who may even jump up and down upon being released from school or anticipating a summer at the beach or receiving his desired Christmas present. That spontaneous joy, increased many times, was my satisfaction when I received those tapes. Receiving a tape meant I could hear Prabhupada speaking Bhagavatam, and I could type it to my heart's content. Prabhupada also writes at the end of this letter that I should, quote, always be absorbed in Krishna consciousness, and Krishna will give you all intelligence, unquote. We often see statements like this in Prabhupada's letters. This confirms the philosophical point that the Supersoul is the Chaitya Guru. Here, the Guru is confirming the Chaitya Guru. We should therefore desire to contact the Supersoul to get intelligence to carry out the order of our spiritual master.
Well, this has been educational and inspiring. Maybe we can do this another time and add some more letters to the series. So I thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Okay, Siddhanta, thank you. Hare Krishna.
Haribo, Jai.
Hare Bol.